In this tutorial, we're going to talk about Clarity security in the context of the IBM Clarity application. So within security, we've got the concept of users and roles. There's menu item security, hierarchy security, and change control. We'll talk about each of these issues in turn. When we're talking about users and roles, it's important. We should seed our current users list with what data that's in this users table. This will give us a current list of who's available, who has access to the tool. There's different types of users as well. So a user can belong, different types of permission. A user can belong to a role, they can manage users who belong to a role, and they can assign users to a role. And also roles can have other roles, so there's a cascading element here. Now let's look at Clarity for a moment. Here we are logged into Clarity. We go under Administration, Security Services. We're going to see the Users and Roles tool. Here's a listing of all the users in the system. If I click on the Roles tab, I'll see the list of all roles. Now notice there are a variety of roles that are set up automatically when the install happens. If I look at the details for a particular role, right now I'm logged in as administrator, and I have this other user called Bob that I can play with. So if I edit the user details, I can see their general information. I could make this person a super user. If I were to do that, they could really do anything, and security really doesn't apply to them. So they're just used sparingly. I can also assign this user to roles. So here's a list. Here are the details around the roles for which Bob has a membership or assignment. So right now it's a member of the Clarity Administrator's role. I notice the three different pieces. So this first one belongs to a role. Next one is manage users that belong to the selected role, and then ability to assign users to assign the selected roles to users. So let's walk through what each one of these really means. So this first one means this person is part of it. So any access that this role gets, the user gets. That's the easiest one. The next one is manage users that belong to the selected roles. So some people assume that if someone is managing a role, they're automatically part of it. Often there's a security administrator who may be giving permission to different pieces of the application to senior executives. That administrator may not have access to all the same things that the executives do. So this permits them to manage the security, but they themselves don't have access to see the same data that the executives would see. And then this last one would be, this helps with delegation, ability to assign selected roles to users. So if you have, maybe you want to let a finance team administrator manage all the finance groups, then that person can manage all the finance groups. They can't manage all groups, but they can at least manage the finance group, so that helps delegate the maintenance responsibility. So now that we have all of our users and our roles, the next thing to think about is menu item security. So this is really, what can a user or role see in the menu structure? So these menus that I see along top here, what should a particular user or role see? For that, we go under Administration, Security Services, Menu Administration. When I click that, I'll see a list of all the menu items that are currently set up, and I can change the settings for individual ones. So here we have a report called Validation. If I go over, I can look at the details for that one. This is really the details for where does this item exist, how do I run it. The security is a separate item, that's the icon to the right. Assign users and roles. So here I can assign users and roles to this menu item. So right now it has a variety of assigned roles, so these roles can see this item. Now there's one level of security past this, which is the hierarchy security, so we'll get to that in a moment. But if someone is part of a role, or they've been given access directly for a particular menu item, that means they'll see that menu item in the list. But there's also a folder aspect to this. Let's say I have access to this validation item here, but I don't have access to the My Reports folder. Because the validation item appears underneath the My Reports, I won't see it. For me to see the validation piece, I need to have access to everything above that. And then that lets me gives me visibility into that item. So now if we talk about the hierarchy security, so at this point, let's say we have access to this validation report. We can see it in our menu items, and we bring it up. Now, we can also control what access someone has to select from. So maybe we have a whole list of departments all across the enterprise, and as part of that listing, we only want to give people access to individual items. So one way we can do that is with the hierarchy security tool. We can say for these finance role, anyone in the finance role, they have access to, these 10 departments. Anyone in the operations role, they have access to these other 10 departments. So they can each manage their respective responsibility areas without overlapping, without giving additional access that they don't need to. So here we are in the hierarchy security piece. We're looking at how do we set up. Let's walk through the example of setting up security for Bob so that he can look at some items within the office products dimension. So we'll click on create permission. We'll get a listing of what's available in our office products dimension. Maybe he's only able to see distribution. So I'll select distribution. And there's only one member, so that's fine. But maybe for the operating divisions, he can also see anything below the furniture division. So if I click furniture division, I can have multiple items here. By default, it goes to single member, but I want to let him see anything below that. So that's going to be iDescend. So you can select furniture division, anything below it. Descendants is anything below it. Children is just the direct items one level below. iChildren is including the member and one level below. And then bottom level descendants is only items that don't have any children, so only those leaf level members. So in this case, let's choose iDescendants, hit common, and we just want this for Bob. So we'll pick Bob, and we're going to click add permission. See, this pops up along the bottom. So distribution, single member, furniture division, iDescendants, looks good. So we save that, and then that's going to show up here in our listing. So now we can see that Bob has hierarchy security access across the Office Products Inc. dimension to these elements. So far, this is pretty straightforward, but it can be challenging to manage once you've got hundreds of users and many different roles across the enterprise. So I'll walk through an Excel file now of one approach to managing that once you've got a large implementation. So imagine we have all of our users listed here in this Excel file, our users and roles. We'll start with that because there's a natural layering effect starting with the users and roles. So we have all of our users, we know their login, their email address. We want to know across each of our roles along the top here, what kind of access do they have? Is it belongs to this role, manage users who belong to the role, or assign users to this role? So maybe we know that for this John user, he belongs to a role and he can also manage users in this role. That's fine. So that helps us track that piece. The next step is really menu item security. So here we would see, here's John Doe's name here. Now we're looking at all of the menu items along the top, be it folders, templates, reports, or toolbox items, or tools in the system. So here we also want to know what do they have access to. So this is really just put in an X on the ones that they have access to. And then the last step, once we know that we've got our users and our roles, what access do they have in that Office Products Inc. dimension? Do they see just what's below furniture division? Do they see head office? What do they have access to see? And sometimes the toughest part of this is really the change control piece. So who decides the access level of different people? And I think that's an important step to make sure that it's articulated in the enterprise. What's that right protocol? A certain manager emails the support desk, and they can give access to, as long as they have access to something, they can grant access to someone else. That's a pretty standard one, but you need to start with something. The challenge becomes if a support team doesn't know who has approval to do things, there can be some back and forth to just validate the approvals are accurate, and you really can grant those kind of permissions. So hopefully this has been helpful talking about IBM Clarity Security.